Volvo has been on a major vehicle renaissance over the last couple of years. You might remember 2 years ago they brought out the XC90. That won North American Utility of the Year. Last year they brought out the S90 full-size sedan, and now we have the V90 and the V90 Cross Country based on that same platform. The big vehicle will be the XC60 that's coming either later this year or early next year, a compact utility. That's really the meat of the market now, so that's the vehicle that's going to help propel Volvo back into the mainstream. So what is the V90? It's basically a station wagon, red hot in Europe, but really not much loved in North America, which is a shame. So one of the things they do is they give it similar approach to what Subaru does with the Outback. They raise it up. It's been raised by about 2.5 inches. You get the cladding along the sides, and the front and the back fascias are slightly different. Ground clearance is an impressive 8.5 inches, but what you lose, in my opinion, is kind of the sex appeal of that V90 wagon, which looks so fantastic. When you see this one with the black cladding and the black around the windows, you lose a bit of the depth and the beautiful lines of this car, which is a shame. So what I am going to do this week with it is I am a volunteer at my son's grade 6 camp. We're taking off for 3 days. I'm going to pack stuff in the back. I get to be the chaperone of a cabin full of 12 boys, and I'm going to do a bit of a road trip journey in my thoughts as we pack it up and drive out of town. Well, this V90 Crosstrack is very similar to the look of the S90 sedan, especially from the front forward. And it has that beautiful large screen in the center. And it's one of those things that you're either going to love or maybe struggle with. And I like the look of it. I struggle a little bit with the functionality of it. I wish there were some redundant buttons on the dash for quick set things like seat heaters and climate control. So that's something that you need to dig around with. It is fairly quick, and it does show a lot of fingerprints, where cars that have a controller in the center that operate the screen, you don't get those dirty fingerprints. Then you move on to the center cluster. It does have a function where you can turn the navigation on or off, and that large 12-inch screen that is part of a premium package for $1,500 in Canada, which also gets you 4-zone climate control, and that's the car I have here. But the seats are wonderfully comfortable, and that's one of the things I love about Volvo. The seats are very, very comfortable. Getting in the back seat, this is what I would call almost a full-size car. It's got a very big back seat with tons and tons of leg room. The seats are reclined a little bit, so it's a very comfortable place to spend time on a long, long journey. Then you can put the back seats down, and you have a massive cargo area. There's 2 tonneau covers, one that covers the cargo area, and then the other one, it really isn't a tonneau cover. It's a dog net if you want to keep a dog in the back without getting into the back seat. That's something that's very practical. And there's some other features. One that you might want to consider is in the back of this vehicle, there's an optional air suspension. Now, it doesn't raise the vehicle up and down for off-roading. It's just a leveling suspension. I've seen this over 20 years ago, and some BMW station wagons had an adjustable rear suspension. So if you put a lot of stuff in the back, it'll help level it out. So I'm here outside the city, driving some highway, and for what this vehicle is designed for, a little bit of light off-roading, gravel roads basically. All right, let's talk about what's under the hood of this vehicle. And it's a great little engine. It's unbelievable that Volvo is using the same engine for a large 3-row SUV as they do for this station wagon. It's a 2-liter turbo and supercharged 4-cylinder engine, and it packs some punch. It's got 316 horsepower and 295 pound-feet of torque. So the supercharger helps get you out of the gate, then the turbocharger takes over at higher RPM. If you drive this with an eye to efficiency, you can get some good fuel economy numbers. However, if you take advantage of all that torque, the fuel economy can suffer. And driving between the city and the highway, averaging about 11 liters per 100 kilometers in this vehicle. This vehicle and the V90 both come standard with all-wheel drive, which is perfect for the Canadian marketplace. So the Cross Country has a slightly higher ride height, 2.5 inches, and you notice it, especially driving on the highway. When you get it into the corners, it can sort of bob around a little bit in the corners. It's got more travel in the suspension, and the engineers at Volvo did a lot of work trying to find the perfect kind of compromise between on-road highway driving at speed, and then the light off-road capabilities of this vehicle for people who want to take it exactly where I'm going, out into the countryside. They might have a cottage or a cabin, and a lot of effort went into this vehicle because Sweden, just like Canada, gets a lot of cold weather about how this vehicle drives in the snow. So that extra ground clearance, the standard all-wheel drive system, tuned for a northern climate, is the perfect recipe for success in Canada. Next, we're doing some light off-roading. So now we're heading onto quite bumpy gravel roads, and that's where a vehicle like this is the perfect choice. So if you have a cottage and you take off every weekend and you drive roads like this, it's the same crowd that really goes for the Outback. This is the kind of vehicle you want. It's a more upscale idea than the Outback. So that 8.5 inches of ground clearance is definitely welcome. And the suspension, as I mentioned, is a compromise between on-road and off-road. One of the things they decided to do is to choose a tire with a slightly softer sidewall. One thing I'm kind of missing though, yes, you can shift the gears here in the center with the shifter, but there are no paddle shifters on this car, which would come in handy at certain points. So I love the look of the sort of the street wagon. I used to have a 5 Series BMW station wagon, absolutely loved it. So I like the sort of the city version with the big 20-inch wheels. The V90 is the one that I would get. I think that just looks fantastic. It looks sleeker than this that has the cladding on it. I think this car would do a much better job if it had a lighter color. So it really comes down to what you're going to use it for. And I think for people that do this sort of stuff, the Cross Country is the way to go. And it's handling it all absolutely wonderfully, and it's still quite refined and smooth, and not a rattle anywhere inside this cabin. Now, a station wagon like this, I absolutely get it. There's much more legroom than most SUVs in the back. You sit lower, it's more comfortable. The cargo space is just as good, if not better, and it has a much better on-road ride. I love the 5 Series wagon I had. However, my wife didn't. As soon as we got rid of it, right to the X5. And I think a lot of women prefer utilities over station wagons. This is a very European approach that really hasn't caught on in North America. This vehicle at $61,000 for the Cross Country, plus packages to get the heated steering wheel, heated back seats, and so on, the price can add up a little bit. But this is the kind of vehicle that appeals to the Subaru Outback set, but with much more luxury. I like it. I like to have one. My wife, however, wouldn't.